Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Reproductive Justice on the Ballot. I'm Regina Davis Moss, and it's my honor to welcome you to today's panel discussion with some of the most powerful, distinguished leaders in the reproductive justice movement. Today, we're going to gather, which is the eve of National Voter Registration Day, to discuss something that's both our right, something that our ancestors fought for, as well as a profound responsibility, and that's our engagement in the democratic process. This conversation is going to be lively, and we're going to also talk about our RJ Voter Day of Action, Reproductive Justice Voter Day of Action, which we dedicate every year to mobilizing our communities and amplifying our collective voice around key policy issues that impact Black women, girls, and gender expansive people. So this year we've decided to have our RJ Day Action take place on the same day of National Voter Registration Day so we can double down on why it's important for us to be engaged. Our focus today is not just going to talk about the act of voting itself, but also how we as a community can educate those around us to participate actively in shaping policies that affect our lives and our bodies. So let's explore how we can amplify our voices through votes and ensure that reproductive justice is upheld every election. Allow me to introduce today's panelists to the stage. Let me start with Marsha Jones, Executive Director of the AFIA Center. Hey, Marsha.
Hello, how are you doing? I'm glad to be here today and looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks for joining us. And Linda Goler Blount, President of Black Women's Health Imperative.
Hi, Regina. Hi, Marsha. I'm looking forward to the conversation as well. Thank you so much for doing this.
And last and certainly not least, Kenda Sutton-EL, Executive Director of Birth in Color in Richmond, Virginia.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
And before we get started, I'd just like to ask our listeners and viewers to make sure to comment, chat us. If you have questions, thumbs up, high five, whatever it is. We want to keep you engaged. Share it with your friends. Let's stay in the space, watch this space, and keep this conversation going. Let me just start by asking the panelists to just give a brief intro. You've already introduced your organization, but tell us a little bit about those organizations and um, why you engage in this work and the way you engage in this work in terms of how you mobilize communities.
Um, the AFIA Center, one of the reasons why it was so important that we mobilize and that we participate and be a part of this work is because our work is unapologetically Black. And it is so important that Black people and Black women identified and gender expansive people see themselves in the work and stuff that's happening and hear their voices. And so we know that if we're there having these conversations with communities see themselves and hear themselves in our voices and see themselves in our work. And so it's important that we see that people see themselves. And and if we're really going to get people as engaged that we want them to be, they have to see themselves walking to the poll. They have to see themselves raising these issues. And so that's why we do it. We do it because we don't want Black folk to get mixed up. When we talk about people of color, I have no problem with people of color. I want to say that. But it is very important that Black people are very clear that we are talking to them, about them, for them.
All right. How about you, Kenda? In what ways does reproductive justice, your organization, effectively mobilize communities to register to vote and to participate in elections, especially areas around voter suppression?
So what we do is we always host like community events, canvassing campaigns, but we also, most importantly, focus on voter education 101 and legislative education 101. Because what happens is a lot of times Black people don't really understand what's really happening and how it happens in the legislative space, or even when you hear different myths about my vote doesn't matter. So what we do is we always meet them where they are, And it's important for us to be the trusted community organization. It's important for us to make sure that we're educating our community and that we're listening to their concerns, but also addressing it with education so that we can effectively see the changes that we want to see across the board.
Linda, how about you? What ways are you mobilizing the community?
Yeah, so the Black
Question.
Women's Health Imperative is the nation's only national organization focused on the health and wellness of Black women and girls, and has been for now 41 years. And so we were founded as a self-care organization. Our founder, Billy Avery, started one of the first birthing centers in Gainesville. And so reproductive justice and that framework has been with us, as well as self-care throughout our history. And what we do is we bring data and policy together to help community-based organizations that we may fund, lawmakers, frankly, even corporate executives understand the connection between Black women's health and community stability, economic stability, being able to make the kinds of choices for education, of course, for healthcare, but frankly, for democracy. And so part of what we do is to make sure that voters understand that there is a very close connection between voting and policy and their health and what they are able to or not able to do. And so we try to make that clear with data and policy so that as people go into the voting booth, they know exactly how this affects their lives.
I'm so glad you talked about the education, but also talking about the connections between some of these issues. A lot of times we spend in our work a lot of times talking about intersectionality, and that's important to our education. So I'd like to ask Marsha. We sit at the intersection of a lot of issues, but in particular, the intersection of reproductive rights and voting. I don't know that there's any other organization that's doing it like we do. How are you ensuring that your communities understand what's at stake during this current election cycle and all of them?
So one of the things that we've always done, even though I love what reproductive justice framework allow for us to do. But when we began doing this work in this way, reproductive justice was being used, but it was just really being used to talk about how people were or were not able to have abortions, right? And that's so important. I don't ever want to take it off of the table. But what we needed to do and what we felt like was important to do is that we had to get to the heart of what was happening in Black communities. We had to get to the heart of what was happening for Black people. And so we used this framework in order to do that. And so we wanted to make sure that we was making the connection. Like we made it so simple here as you have potholes in your street because you are in a community where you're not seen, you're not heard, and your voice is not being counted at the poll. And because you're not voting, they don't even care enough to come and fix a pothole in your street that's turning up your car, that's barely running because you barely have the money to make it. We're in a community where we are living in food, where it's not food deserts, it's apartheid in our communities. We're living in these places, and so we are the people that we serve at the Afia Center. My staff is staffed by people in the community. My staff is staffed by people who once volunteered for us. Our staff is staffed by people that we have helped along the way with our mutual aid. And so we literally get on the ground and we help people to understand how you live, how you breathe, even talking about environmental justice. We don't even just stop. We even go there. We talk about the fact that there's not even places in your community to work. Like you can't, when I lived in North Dallas, I didn't even have to have a car. I literally did not have to have a car when I lived in North Dallas. Whereas I live in the southern sector of Dallas now, and I wouldn't leave it for nothing in the world that I can't get anywhere without a car. And so we even talked about those things. The differences is what happened when you're not voting. But if you do vote, because even though I do live in the southern sector of Dallas now, I live in a southern suburb, right? So I don't have a whole lot of potholes, But I'm gonna tell you, when I'm leaving my office and I'm driving down the street, when I go under the interstate, I leave a part of Dallas and I go into my suburbs, and immediately the streets start driving better. So we talk about that, but they also, there's a huge pocket of voters in my community also. So we talk about that. So we make these things, we interconnect these things. And so we use integrated voter engagement to do it. I am a huge proponent of integrated voter engagement. Because if you're not talking to the people every day, year round, making these things stick, then yes, we can get them to the polls and vote when things are exciting. But what happens on the down ballots? What happened in the community? What's happening with your city council person? We make those kind of connections. So that's why I started really low with the pothole. We connect how important it is you vote by whether or not you have potholes in your street or not. And then when these people start to feel this power, because there is no power like an informed voter, especially a grassroots on the ground, living these experiences every day, because that's who I am. There is no more powerful voice than that person that makes the connection. And so we build our programs around that, centering it in reproductive justice and moving it to our community and educating our folk, because I'm a fervent believer in people being educated.
And you know what? I'd never like to assume people know what reproductive justice is. So can you just tell our viewers what reproductive justice is?
You would ask me that. So reproductive justice, it is the right to. So it's just built on a foundation of people having uh, full bodily autonomy, right? And being able to have children, not have children, be able to form families the way they want to form families, to have children if they choose to have children, to not have children if they choose not to have children, and also to be able to raise those children with the resources that they need in order to do it, and also to be able to do that without state-sanctioned violence, right? And so all of these things have to happen, but none of these things happen if people are not politically empowered, if people are not economically empowered, if people are not empowered in these ways, have human rights and social justice. So that's the way we talk about reproductive justice here. Yeah. So that's what it is. So I know, like, yeah.
No,
I
I
was
like.
like to go somewhere, but no. Yeah.
I asked you because I always like how you make a distinction between agency and autonomy, which is so important. And you talked about your evolution in reproductive justice, and so I did that on purpose because I love how you. It's such an expansive framework, and it's we can all fit in, and that's what I love about this movement is that people come to it through different doors, but we all come through that door and we come together and sit at that table to work together. Kenda, wanted to come to you. Talk about how you in Virginia, how you're educating and informing the community there about what's at stake for each election cycle, but also how you helping them understand that there's an intersectionality between reproductive rights and voting.
Sure. So I always like to give credit where it's due. Is I had the pleasure of actually studying under Miss Billy Avery. I was in one of her cohorts, and then I've always been able to follow the foundation of reproductive justice. So, like, I would definitely like to echo what Miss Marsha said, because that's really, really important, and that's really what we do here in Virginia. We try to make sure that our people really understand that yes, presidential election is very, very important, but local elections actually truly matter as well. And helping them to understand that all of it intersects with each other, whether it's housing, transportation, whether it's health related, whether it's even self-care related, even if it's juvenile justice related. And so what we do is we try to make sure that we're meeting people where they are and we're going to them to make sure that we're educating, making sure that we're offering different angles that they can look at certain situations and making sure that they truly understand what's being said and try to get them away from the things that are happening on social media. I know that that's the world. It's supposed to be the information age, but social media can be so detrimental when it starts to spin stories in a different negative way. And so making sure that they're asking us, their trusted community, of questions that they need answers to, and making sure that they understand that what we're providing them is the truth. And giving them evidence-based information and say like, hey, this is where you can look at, this is the resources that you can go to, just so that we're building on that framework. And it's not really like it's our point of view, but making sure that they understand the different framework as it relates to reproductive justice.
And Marsha, thank you. And Marsha, how about you? How are you educating and informing?
Um,
I'm sorry,
so
Linda. I'm sorry.
did you
I'm
say?
sorry. Marsha, yes.
Okay,
Marsha
I was going
and
to say
then
because I think
Linda.
I answered that.
Yes, Linda. Linda,
Not
please, and
because
then Marsha, I'm going to go to you. Sorry.
okay, because we're all doing this.
Yes.
And but
You
but
know.
the
Look,
beauty of this is we're all doing it in different ways, and it
Mhm.
takes multiple ways to reach people. As Kenda and Marsha were talking, I was thinking, we talk a lot about education, and sometimes people don't necessarily want to be educated because they think they know, but they do want action, and that's what the beauty of the reproductive justice framework is it gives people tools to act. Because especially people in this work, we want to do something, we need to do something. So we often say, facts educate, they don't motivate, but people need stories, and we need to, in the education process, in our outreach and conversation, we need to make sure the people that we're talking to see themselves in what we're talking about, see their own stories in what happens when you vote, what happens when you don't vote, in the stories that they read about in the paper. We just released Black Women Vote. It's our policy agenda. We are a proud member of In Our Own Voice, and so we lend our voice, and our action to the work of In Our Own Voice to help voters and would-be voters see the consequences of inaction and the benefits of action. We've all talked to those people who say, "Oh, I'm going to stay home, I'm not going to vote, it doesn't matter." It absolutely does. And in everything that we're doing and in the way we present the issues, people see that it matters. They can see the impact of voting or not voting. And so we try to make sure people, of course, know the issues, but we need to help people understand. And what we try to do is make them sort of aware from a personal level about why they're important. And to Kenda's point, not just nationally, but in your state, in your city, in your district, because that's where the power gets exercised, and that's where the limitations are felt. At the national level, but when you can't get to a poll to vote, that's not a national issue, that's a local issue.
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing of stories about people. There are active efforts to try to make it really difficult for us to vote. We're hearing stories where people's no longer finding themselves on the rolls anymore. They're
Mhm.
closing, voter sites, DMVs, all these things to try to create barriers for us to vote. You talked about the consequences, but Linda, I wonder if you would or could talk about some of the barriers that you've heard about in the communities that you're serving, individuals are facing when they're trying to vote, and how we're using RJ to help address those challenges.
Sure. So I think a lot of people are familiar with this term, the social determinants of health. Well, there are the social, political, economic determinants of policy and politics as well. And I think the thing that is important to know is that the systems that we live in, that surround us, are frankly determined by racism, gender discrimination, and economic inequality. These are the systems that were designed for and by the people who benefit for them. So, historically marginalized or minoritized communities face many barriers, such as restrictive voter ID laws. You've got to present identification, limited polling locations and times,
Yeah.
language barriers. In Georgia, a whole bunch of people were just purged from voter rolls and under, suspicious conditions. There's poorly trained poll workers, insufficient early voting, mail-in drop box locations, and in some states, employers make it difficult to vote because they don't give employees time off to vote or to help loved ones or family members vote. And of course, there are the issues that Marsha mentioned, like transportation, long wait times, um, and those kinds of things disproportionately impact low income individuals, of course, Black and brown people, and women, especially, who might be caring for their extended family, people who might be caring for children. All of these people have demands on their time. So reproductive justice advocacy, I think, addresses these challenges by promoting voting rights as essential to shaping healthcare policies, to helping people understand that what we can do and can't do on a daily basis is determined by these policies. And it gives us this framework. So the beauty is it connects the dots between health and policy and economic stability and self-determination, and I would say, and the future of the promise of democracy. So advocates support how policies can expand voter access, and we can also show graphically how and for whom voting is suppressed. So people say they don't know, and we've all probably heard those people say, "Oh, I had no idea this was happening." We can show them, and we can talk about the impact on our communities. and in hope we can actually spur a sense of sort of righteous outrage. And one thing that sort of comes to mind is a woman in Georgia, Monica Poole, broke her ankle. She couldn't find a drop box. She wanted to vote by mail and vote early. She couldn't find a drop box within 20 minutes of where she lived in rural Georgia. So she just sort of put out the call. You know, we were talking about social media, and people rallied to her. They came and got her, they drove her, but it was such an issue that it shone a really bright light on what happens when people can't vote.
Yeah. Kenda, what are you hearing about in Virginia in terms of barriers?
So they just did a whole redistricting, last General Assembly for Virginia. So people are trying to really understand, like, where can I actually go vote at? Do I have to do the voter registration? Because people are saying, hey, I tried to do the early voting and they're telling me that my registration location is incorrect. What do I actually do? And so that's what we're hearing. We're also hearing even from the high school students who were originally this was the high school students that graduated this past year, that they didn't really understand like that this is their year to actually vote. They all turned 18, so now they're trying to figure out how to register, and some of them have been like hit with obstacles because they're like, well, if you stay at your college, then you can't use your permanent home address. And we're saying actually you can use your home address or you could use your college address. And so it's a lot of like miseducation as it relates to that, and making sure like, hey, the college students, the youth really understand like, okay, so this is how the process goes. This is how you navigate it. But also a couple of communities have decided that they're going to do what they used to do back in the day called the watchdog community, and monitoring the voter suppression, just so that we can get a hold on it for any future, and we can actually fix the issues that are arising, because we don't want people to not be able to get to the polls. And so we're just assessing the landscape, trying to put together transportation for those in the rural communities that it's going to take them a while to get to a place that they can vote, making sure that they understand the voting ballot, the early voting, and when it's over and when it's not over, when it begins. And so that's really what we're seeing right now. It's just a whole bunch of miseducation and just us trying to get all of the community partners together to where we can say, all right, where can you help? Where can you assist? And just putting all of our efforts together to officially, effectively mobilize in a great way, so that when it does come time to vote on the final day of election, prior to election, that all of these kinks are actually worked out, and that we're making sure that the elderly get there and the youth. Those are our primary focuses, because we know that they have the most barriers in front of them.
And Marsha, are you hearing about any barriers in Texas? And
Okay.
is using reproductive justice? I know that obviously you are, but how are you
Right.
feeling tackling
I think
Texas?
the biggest thing that happens here is misinformation. Like people get misinformation, and so trying to go back and fix that, like with the million people that we purged on our voter thing this year. First of all, they do this almost every year in Texas, and so it may not have, maybe it didn't catch the news. It may not have been as much. So that's been happening. So it is the misinformation and trying to help people to understand, because it's 30 million people in Texas. So you very well may not have been purged. So walking people through how to make sure that they're still on the voter registration, making sure that they have just some small things, like people don't know that they have to take their ID with them to vote, even if they have their voter registration card, and your ID cannot be expired, not even one day. So if it expired, so like if I had to vote today, I would be in trouble because my ID expired on my birthday, September 1. I'm going tomorrow and get that fixed. But even if
Yes.
it's September the 2nd, you can't vote. Like it's just that they're just that stringent here. And so I think the biggest thing we deal with is misinformation. And it is the misinformation that keep people from the polls. And so people will literally not go to the polls. Like, I am lying not. We have heard so many people say, well, they purged us off. Yes, they did purge 1 million people. So I have to always say, but it is 30 million people in Texas. You may not have been one. Let's go through the steps to make sure that you were not purged off. And so those are the things. So that's what we're doing, even for our RJ Day of Action. We're hitting the college campuses. So we'll be at maybe 4 to 8 local schools here on tomorrow. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Definitely working to get people registered to vote, but we're going to be asking questions, getting information, making sure that people know that they can vote. But I think you all have already covered everything else. Here, the big thing for me is misinformation.
So let's talk a little bit more about that. They are purging people off the system, people
Yeah.
that should legitimately be on
Mhm.
there.
Yeah. Like
Why?
here,
Why do you?
if you've not voted in 3 consecutive elections,
Mhm.
you can get purged off of the registration, off of the voters list here. I didn't even know that until we start. But I've always voted, but I didn't even know that until we really got engaged and really got involved in doing voter education about 6 years ago. I'm gonna say about 2 years before COVID is when I realized that if you had not voted, you could be taken off. If you've gotten too many things returned from an address that you had, you can get purged off of the voter list. Even though we all know a lot of us get mail. I know I used to when my mother was still alive and I was real grown, and I still got my imported mail at my mama's house because sometimes I moved a lot. Life ain't always been what it is now, and I moved a lot. But I did know that Jesse Lee Jones was not moving. So a lot of times, we get mail at our mom's house, and so the house where we're living at, we're not getting mail there, so you'll get taken off. So it's little things, but you in the South, you can just sneeze a lot and get purged off of the list. Like, I know that sounds, but it almost seems just that easy to get purged off of the list.
And Regina,
Why do you?
I just wanted to say one thing. I think it's just important not to underestimate the lengths to which people will go
Yes,
to try to keep
Yes.
people from voting. I mean,
yes,
I don't think that can be overstated.
it
I
can.
mean, and when Kendra talked about it's disinformation as well. It's just telling people
Yes.
that stuff that's just
Mhm.
blatantly wrong.
Mhm.
If you have too many outstanding parking tickets, you can't vote.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mm.
it is shocking what has been made up over the last few years to keep people home.
Yeah, we just had someone, a viewer, just comment. That's wild. I don't think people realize how crazy it is out here. Why do you think they are working so hard to remove us from the roll?
Well, for one, they know that Black people have the. I mean, if we all went out and vote, we all saw what happened in the elections when it came to Obama, even when it came to Biden this time. When we all go out to vote, we can really make the change. And so they're going to always try to put a barrier in place. They're going to always try to spin a story into a different way that this person is harmful for us because they know what will happen when we really realize our power and we actually get all of our people out to vote. And that's just plain and simple. Like they know that, the world knows that, and so they're going to try everything possible, especially with this election. You have where they're trying to act like the events in Charlottesville never happened, and we're like, we have photos, we have videos, we have all of the things to say like, no, this was in fact a real thing. And so they're just gonna pull out everything out of their hats. And so that's what we have to like really prepare up until the election day to make sure that everybody is prepared and make sure that everyone can get out and vote.
I
Anybody else
I
want
think
to?
too. I was gonna say, I think too, because they know that when we vote, like, we are probably the most informed voters that you have ever seen. We are not, because it's in our DNA. And so we don't just go vote to vote. Like, you may have one or two people, but like our voters, when we vote, and when we help our voters to understand the power in their vote, they use that power. No, I don't think anybody call their legislators the way like Black folks be calling their people. Like, look, this have to happen in my house. I voted for you. You need to come right now and fix this store next to me. You need to come right now. Our voters are really informed, powerful voters. They hold their legislators accountable. They themselves become accountable. And when you get our people engaged in the voting system, we are in it all the way. That's what they don't want to happen. They don't want informed voters either, because they know what happened when we vote.
That's a fact. Linda, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with everything, and I would also say demographics, it plays a really important
Demographics.
important role. Right now the average baby, and from now on, the average baby born will be something other than white.
Okay.
And there is a very real fear, I'll just say it, fear that black and brown people may actually unite, and then all's lost. And with the current fertility rates being what they are, there is no changing this. This is inexorable. It's going to happen. And so there is this very real fear about where we might be in 20 years and 25 years, when most adults are something other than white, and what that means for voting and what it means for policy. And so we too need to be mindful of that and think about what that might mean for children and grandchildren going forward, because we certainly don't want them to be experiencing the same kind of voter suppression and other kinds of, frankly, violence that we see among people who are simply trying to exercise their civic duty and their rights.
Yeah, so you're right, Marsha. It's actually a fact that Black women are some of the most committed and most decisive voters. They know this. We often carry these elections, so that's why they're always speaking to us when it's time to campaign. But we got to make sure we keep those receipts and let them know that those receipts come due, not just in the first 100 days, but every day, 365, if you want to be reelected. Kenda, I wanted to go back to you were talking a little bit about youth engagement, and we know that youth turnout is going to be really important. It can significantly shape elections. What strategies are you all using to engage your younger demographic? And what are you talking to them with regard to? Are you talking to them about reproductive justice and in the voting process?
Yes. So what we do is we do it all year long to make sure that they're engaged with us all year long. And that's why they really listen to us, is because we don't just show up when it's election time. And so what we do is we educate them on reproductive justice framework just in general, but also as it relates to the election. We're going to universities. We're talking to the college students. Matter of fact, we start on October 10th, like really going every single week to make sure, like, hey, are you registered? Did you get any, did you have any barriers? And so that's really how we're going to change the game when it comes to making sure that our youth are there. We're going to HBCUs, and we're also going to PWIs. And we have different things in place of like, hey, here, come get this swag, come get different things, so that they actually will come visit our tables and they will engage in conversation with us if they've never seen us before. And so that's really how, and we're answering their questions, because they still have sex questions that they're like, hey, what is this? This what happened to me? Or, hey, where can I access this? And so being that trusted person where they just know, like, hey, certain HBCUs, you can't access contraception and like different things. So we're that pipeline to say like, okay, just come over here and we'll take care of it. And so that's how we keep them engaged. But we also have a youth advisory team where they actually put together things and they reach out to their own people and share different information as another way that they can get resources and education.
And I think that's so important, right? Because young adults, that's a time when you're exploring your sexuality. You haven't quite figured all those things out. You have those questions, and you need to know where you can access resources if you might need them. And absolutely, what's happening now is going to impact how they exercise those options for them. Marsha, how are you engaging younger voters?
So our organizers are engaging with younger voters. That's part of our move at the college campuses this year. Rather than just being just basically on the streets in the community, they made a decision to really be targeted for college campuses, and so That's community colleges as well as a couple of the 4-year schools in our area, and I think they're being very targeted to the schools that's in the areas where it's most black and brown people. And I believe when that's all, once we do this day, it won't stop there. They're going to continue to go to the college campuses. I'm not sure if they decide they're going to go monthly, but they're going to continue to go. We're going to go there. We're going to set up and we're going to do RJ voting. And then from there, we're going to get younger folks signed up with us to be part of our advocacy stuff that we'll do on the Hill next year in 2025 when we meet, because we only meet every other year in Texas on the odd year. And so the goal is to take a lot of these students with us when we go, not just to take them, but they'll also be a part of our RJ Institute that will happen before we do legislation. So it's going to be very targeted to them. So they're starting tomorrow, but they won't stop tomorrow. They're going to continue to do that. I also believe that we're working with people who are working with the high schools who getting, so we didn't tackle the high schools. That was a little big for us. And so they're working with folks. So that's the thing that I think that we're doing now that I don't think we've been as successful as we are now. And we have really been able to align ourselves with some amazing community partners, people who are on the ground, who's already in those places. What we're bringing in that space is an RJ framework. So bringing an RJ framework is the only thing that's different. And so we are also working with folk who are working with people in the high school, because I don't want to get the age wrong, but I believe if you're going to be 18 within 10 months of when it's time to vote, and if someone on here that can correct me, please do. They're working with them to get those seniors registered to vote so that they can vote this election. So that's one of the things that we're doing. I got to correct something. One of our people, I'm glad our people are on here. I got some bad information, but our people just gave me some good information. You can, but I don't want y'all to let y'all ID get expired. But you can still vote if they're expired for like about a year, I think. But someone told me that it was less than a year. So I wanted to make sure that I fixed that. We got some sharp people here at the Afia Center. They listening. So I wanted to fix it. I don't like to make a mistake and don't fix it. But yeah, so those are the things that we're doing. We're being very intentional. We're working with the high schools and very intentional with working with the community colleges and the 4-year institutes.
I'm glad you mentioned that. But I want to tell you that if you don't always take our word, we've made that really easy for you. If you go to our website, I'm an rjvoter.org, you can check your registration status. You can actually register to vote if you need to. And then you can absolutely reach out to these organizations if you're in Virginia, Texas, and Black Women's Health Imperative. They just released this amazing document. We've tried to make this as easy as possible for you, so please utilize it. We're coming close to the end of our conversation. Time goes so fast, and I want to make sure we have a moment to address any questions you might have based on these conversations. So please leave them in the chat. It's an opportunity for us to explore some issues further before I come back to Linda. And so, Linda, how are you all engaging younger voters and talking to them about RJ and its impact on voting?
Yeah. Well, thank you for mentioning Black Women Vote. That is our, every election cycle, we publish this. And so it's really useful, has information that is germane to our health, what policy legislation impacts our health. So we too do work on HBCU campuses with young people. We had a doula training program, but we also have My Sister's Keeper, which is very much a leadership program to help young women in particular understand how policy affects their lives, how to build leadership and advocacy skills, because this is the next generation. But the other thing we try to do is sort of make use of technology and delivery channels. We look at language, we look at tone. I mean, this is really important when we're talking about youth. It's not enough just sort of to be where young people are. You've got to be relevant. And so we have worked with influencers. We have worked with Reese, who brought the receipts, and we'll continue to make it clear what needs to happen. But what we try to do is talk about these issues, talk about health, talk about policy, talk about voting in a way that personalizes it. And the people we work with also can personalize these issues and speak to why they vote. Because people could listen to me, but it's very different when we have someone who is known, is relevant among young people to talk about his or her experience or their experience. So it's not enough just to be in that space. It is very important to understand what young people are looking for, so we listen to them and we take our cues from the 18 to 34-year-old crowd and try to frame the issues and particularly frame voting in a way that they see themselves, and then we'll get out and vote and take people with them. Oh, Regina, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Linda. I want to remind you all that are watching, if you have any questions, comments, please drop them in the chat. While we're waiting for that, I want to talk about some news that came out today. ProPublica released a story about Amber Nicole Thurman. Did you all hear about this? This is a young
Yes.
lady who needlessly died because of what happens when we pass these laws, and it basically sends our healthcare system into chaos. And because of the ban, and because she's one of the very rare people who had a side effect to a medication abortion and needed a procedure to clear the products of conception, and was not able to access it too. So unfortunately died because of infection, went into septic shock. And so, it's just, how many times do we need to have this conversation? How many times do we need to tell people that, I mean, sometimes what we think when we pass these policies, they have unintended consequences. There was a time when we crafted policies when we really had to do that work and had to think about all those things. But what are your thoughts? I think everybody is just heartbroken. Did anybody else want to talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So happy to jump in, and then obviously I want to hear from Kenda and Marsha. First of all, I just want to say medication abortion is generally very, very safe. This was a very, very rare complication. And one of the things that makes this so tragic is it was treatable. I mean, this didn't have to happen, but this young woman tried to get care, and she faced a system of barriers. But I know but I want people to sort of put themselves in the space of knowing that something is wrong, you need medical help, and then going to try to get medical help and having your providers literally be afraid to take care of you for fear of prosecution, incarceration, and being met with this wall essentially that says, well, when you are close to death, then we can call this something else and then provide health care to you. But for now, because we know this one thing, that this was medication abortion, we're going to stand by.
I agree with you, Miss Linda, because when you think about it, and I know people are going to say, well, medication abortion, this is why it shouldn't be legal and all of the things, but the facts are the facts. And it's that people who actually took an oath to protect and make sure that I'm healthy decided that, no, I have to wait until it is this in order to be treated. And when you just look at the maternal mortality rates in the US and in general, it's horrible. And these people who are doing these policies aren't even realizing that these abortion bans are affecting that and making it go higher. And so as you level set and you think about 82% of the deaths are preventable anyway, even when it comes to maternal mortality. So when you add the abortion ban aspect to it, how many are that are preventable? And in this case, this was preventable. And so I'm not sure, how to get these people who say like, oh, well, I'm pro-life and all of the things, but clearly you're not, because you wouldn't create these policies that are still harming women in general, that whether I want to have a child or whether I don't, it's still my choice. And I still shouldn't die because this was my choice.
Yeah. I think
Marsha.
when I was reading it, I think what I was bothered most about, the whole thing was just ridiculous, was just horrible. But I think my first thought went to how many of these stories have we not heard?
Mm.
How many stories have we not heard because of one fear of the system? There is still so much shame and stigma attached to people deciding that they're going to have an abortion. I cannot tell this, and then this person dying and the family member choosing not to say that this is what the death was from. It made me think about us at the Afia Center. We're so protective over women's stories, and so we don't do a lot of story sharing and storytelling here. We got to create a way that Black women are telling their stories and their families are telling their stories. The same thing we've done with maternal mortality, create a way that we can get these stories in a very compassionate way, in a way that it move, hopefully that it move policy, it will move legislation. We've got to do the same thing here because I know this is the only story we've heard, but I know in my heart that this is not the only time that this has happened. And so that's where my heart went. My heart went to how many stories have we not heard? And even some of these stories that we have heard, how many? And so yeah, that's what I thought. I always think that's where I always go. That's where I go to. What have we not
Yeah.
heard?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all are left there that but also it just reminded me of how why we need reproductive justice because
We
it
have
touches on it was
yes,
so many things, right? There was the
so many.
education. She was studying to be she was a medical assistant. She wanted to become a nurse. There's an economic impact to this. There is, she had
The trauma of
a
her
son,
son.
her
Yeah.
Mhm.
son, right?
Yeah.
So the right to raise your child in a safe and sustainable environment. And so there's all these pieces to this with which our founding mothers had been saying from the beginning that have an impact on this and why we need to be continuing to do what we already do, right? It's just to continue to educate people about the impact that is, as we talk about, so much farther upstream than just, it is so much, our conversations are so much larger than just abortion. And so, I'm just so encouraged to be working with you all. I'm love for those people that are watching. You got some of the most powerful, most committed the people on this call. If you've got questions, ask them. If not, I'm sure that they will be more than happy to follow up with you offline. So I'm going to just hold on just a little bit more in the chat. If not, then we'll end a little bit early with you all, telling people how they can find you and how they can follow you on socials. But real quickly, what's your call to action, Kenda, and what are you going to be doing tomorrow during National Voter Registration Day?
So tomorrow, the organizers will actually be at the different universities trying to get people to register to vote and making sure they understand everything that's going on and make sure they don't have any questions. And my call to action is that if you know someone who says, "Hey, I'm just not going to vote," please send them to either one of us. Send them to give them all of the resources because no vote is still a vote for someone. And so making sure that they really understand what's really at stake and that it's not just about abortion, it's about reproductive justice.
Linda.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I want people to envision a future where there are not only no barriers, but where policies actually facilitate health and wellness, facilitate access to quality care, facilitate to safe and healthy births, facilitate access to abortion care when it's needed. That's what I want people to focus on, not what's not happening, but what actually could happen. And then think about the people you know who are in office, the people that you read about who are running for office, and where they are. Are they really using language that brings to mind this vision of the democracy of health and wellness for Black women and for everyone? And if they are, then vote for them. If they're not, then find those who are and vote for them. And the call to action, of course, is register and vote. Bring everybody you know to the polls. Vote early. Save yourself the time. Don't get in a line. Just vote early. It is possible to do that. and make sure that you tell everyone you know that voting does matter. And Kenda, I love the way you said that. That is, and I'm going to use that. If a no vote is a vote for someone, so
Yeah.
understand what you're doing when you decide to stay home.
Yeah.
Marsha.
Yeah, I think about how, even though I was older when I started doing this stuff, how naive I was, because I knew we were always going to have a birth center one day because I wanted people to be able to have all this kind of stuff. But in my naive mind, I thought that at the same time we could make sure that folk could birth safely, they could also have an abortion safely if they wanted to. That's just how naive I was. Even as an old woman, I just thought that that could happen. I'm not going to give up on that. I'm not going to give up on that. That's why we got to vote. So my call to action is there's going to be people out on the street and we're going to be doing all this stuff tomorrow. I'm going to be talking to my family. I want to make sure that my family vote. I have people in my family who have different spectrums, like we all do, who are overly religious. I'm not gonna say overly religious, but they do too much, and people that's thinking that a problem can be fixed outside of what we do with our hands. So I want to make sure that my family is going to vote. I want to make sure that there are children, because we have children that's old enough to vote. I mean, I have a great grandson, so that's just to let you know where we are. I'm going to talk to my family. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to encourage people to talk to their families and make sure that your family is registered to vote, and make sure that your family go and vote. Because if we do that, we will probably find ourselves capturing some folk who were missing, because most of the time we miss the problem that's right closest to us. So I'm going to do that. Besides, I'll probably stop by a couple of places that our people are going to be tomorrow, because I love seeing people gather for information. But we have a well-equipped team here. That's why I gave that bad information, and they got me right on together real quick. We have a well-equipped team here who do amazing work, and I'm going to let them do what they do. And so, but I'm going to do what I do, and I'm going to work with the people that I know, even some friends of mine. I'm going to make sure I'm going to start talking to them and making sure that the people that I know, that the people that they know, and that the people that they know are registered to vote, and that they vote. I want people to have a plan, an action to go vote.
Thank you. And so hopefully you saw at the bottom of the screen how you can follow Black Women's Health Imperative, Birth in Color, and the AFIA Center. You heard what they're going to do. Now I'm going to ask you what you're going to do. And maybe you won't be at a school, or maybe you won't be in the community, but you can certainly check your registration status. And you can certainly, if you're not already registered to vote, take that first step, or talk to your family member who may not be registered. There is nothing more powerful than you talking to somebody that they know, that they trust you, and tell them your story. Tell them, hopefully you heard something today that helps you understand what's at stake and how important it is for us all to turn out to vote if we want change. I want to thank our panelists today, for their invaluable insights, and to everyone here for engaging in this vital conversation. I would ask you all to continue to follow their work. You want to get more information about their work. Again, Black Women's Health Imperative, Birth in Color, and the AFIA Center. As we stand on this threshold of the Reproductive Justice Voter Day of Action, let's remember that our engagement does not end at the ballot box. It begins with our commitment to register to vote and to check our registration status, to download our ballot and prepare thoroughly for our voting decisions, and to activate our voting circle by sharing the RJ Voter Circle graphic with 5 of your loved ones. That's all we're asking you to do. Just pick 5. I know you got more than 5, but pick 5 and share that graphic. I encourage each of you to continue educating yourself and your communities about reproductive justice by visiting blackrj.org. Together, we have the power to shape a just and equitable society. So let's use our voices where they matter most in our votes, because like we said, reproductive justice is on the ballot. Thank you, and have a great day.
I am a reproductive justice voter to honor the reproductive and voting rights warriors that came before me and to ensure that generations after me have the right of bodily autonomy and self-determination.
Hi, my name is Sydney. I use her, she pronouns, and I'm a reproductive justice voter because I am a Black feminist advocate and believer in our bodies and our autonomy. And as freedom comes, it's going to require that we have reproductive justice to exist.
Hi, I am a reproductive justice voter because I have 2 little girls who I want to grow up in a world that is prepared to embrace them in the fullness and their full autonomy in the practicing of their full agency as women in this world.